Yo,
Howdy, howdy, howdy. I'm messing with my shot right now on the air. That's okay. Do I look okay?
you look fantastic, Justin.
Why, thank you. Hi, everybody. Now that we know you're here too, welcome to episode 19 of Wrestle Recap. My name is Justin Tate,
My name is Michelle
and
Tate.
we are, as you know, the only brother sister duo that takes you on the journey of wrestling throughout the decades.
And we have a real great time doing it. Justin, current wrestling, we're going to have to take this segment away for a little
I
bit
think we
because
do.
number one, nothing's happening. And number two, I think you and I either are both out of town together or separately out of town for like the next 2 months. And so it won't even make sense what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
we'll be talking about. Well, it would be great if we could just pretend like we knew what happened at, say, Survivor Series, and then just see if it lines up later on down the line. But
Right? Yeah, we're gonna be doing a lot of pre-recording over the next couple months, but I assume y'all are okay with that. But
yeah,
let's get into the tidbit, the little niblet of current wrestling news we do have today.
sure. So I have to go backwards on something I said last week. Last week we were talking about Survivor Series and the Bloodline versus the Bloodline and everything, and you asked me if I thought they would add Cody Rhodes to the Bloodline team, the original Bloodline team. And at the time, I said, well, I don't think they need him. It can just stay 4-on-4. Well, now it looks like they are going to do 5-on-5. And we saw on Raw this past week both sides trying to recruit somebody for their side. At this point, Cody's the only one I can think of.
I mean, yeah, he's the only one we can think of, but do we really need a fifth man? Like, this is getting out of control, Justin.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree. I
I
agree.
mean, we're going back to the old Survivor series that you and I have been watching where it's like 20 people on each side and it sucks. Like, we are going to be like, okay, there's a sixth man, a seventh man. Like, when will it end?
Yeah. So I don't think they need anybody else, but if they're going to do it, which it looks like they are, I, I guess I'll just say Cody and The Rock. That's just going to be my guess.
What if The Rock ends up on like the Roman side? That would be weird.
I
But
think that's where he. Oh no, yeah, you're right. I don't know. We'll just
I
have to
don't know
see.
either.
I don't know where in the country I will be on the date that Survivor Series happens because, as we talked about last week, I am going everywhere, just about every time zone in America. Speaking of war games, it looks like we will also have a women's war games match. Um, just gonna say it, not a fan of this idea, and
Really? Why?
it's not because women don't belong in the war games or whatever. There just haven't been any women's stories strong enough to warrant a war games match. And I absolutely agree that men and women should get, equal treatment, equal exposure. But in this case, it's at the risk of really making a lot of sense. And it seems like it's just being shoehorned in there just so the women get the same thing as the men.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I can completely see that. I'll agree with you on that one because yeah, it just honestly, I feel like there's really not a story going on outside of like Rhea and Liv.
Right. Yeah.
Honestly, like that's the only story I can think of right now. But I don't know. We'll see. As you said, I don't even know when Survivor Series is because after Halloween, it's the Thanksgiving Christmas race, and it pretty much I just blink and then we're in 2025. So I'm just riding the wave,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Well, we're almost through the year, but on the show we're covering today, we are at the relative beginning of a brand new year.
Oh yeah, you want to go back to 1989?
Let's do it.
Let's do this. Bah!
Oh, they
It's a
gave me
nice time.
peanuts. It was so
They gave
kind.
you peanuts?
Yeah, yeah.
You know what they gave me?
What?
Oh, wait. I was gonna say Surge, but that came out in, like, 95.
Yeah, yeah. Peanuts have been
Um,
around
they gave
forever.
they gave me the new Coke.
New
That's the only
Coke.
80s
There
drink
you
I know.
go.
Crystal
New.
Pepsi.
Yeah, there you go. Well, tell us about the show we're covering today.
Alrighty, let's do it. So, it's technically still NWA. I like to just call it WCW, but we're just gonna say NWA, WCW, Chi-Town Rumble. So this happened on February 20th, 1989 at the UIC Pavilion in Chicago, Illinois. Do you have any fun factoids about that venue? Is it a
It's
church?
still there. It's not a church. and it's in Chicago.
Okay,
That
fantastic.
is
Well,
actually not one of the cities where I'm going by the end of this year, so that's surprising. Yes.
oh, wow. I don't think I've ever been to Chicago outside of the airport.
You know what?
It's one of the few.
The one time I've been was for wrestling. I went on an overnight trip to go to Money in the Bank in Chicago in like 2018, I think. I flew from where I was living in Austin to Chicago, went to the show that night and flew back to Austin the next day.
Man, you are a dedicated fan, but I've done that for wrestling shows
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Well, our commentators are Jim Ross and Magnum TA because like you said last week or last NWA show, Tony Schiavone gone.
That's right. That's right. We will see him again very soon, though. Hint, hint.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, Justin, do you have any guesses about the number 1 song in the US on this day?
So I'm thinking 1989, even though Taylor Swift was born that year, I don't think she was singing quite yet. I will go with something by Wham.
Wham!
Yeah.
You love that Wham Christmas music coming up.
That song sucks. Last Christmas, that song can eat my butt.
Is that the same thing as simply
No,
having
that's Paul
Oh.
McCartney, and I love Paul McCartney, and I hate that song too.
Oh, okay. Well, you're kinda close, I guess. I mean, to me, this is, like, one of the top, 5 '80s songs I think of with the '80s, so I'm just gonna play it.
Huh?
Oh, 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 straight up by Miss Paula Abdul. She was, like, the best judge on American
You
Idol.
think so?
Just
I was
kidding.
always a fan of Cara Diaguardi.
Ew, why? I mean, my favorite was technically Steven Tyler because hello, love Steven
So
Tyler.
name me the last 5 American Idols.
Oh, I stopped watching 8 years ago. I didn't even know it was still on until mom said
So
something.
did everybody else. That's the problem.
Exactly. I can't name
Name me
anyone who
5
won The
winners of The
Voice.
Voice.
I was gonna say, I can't name you one winner of The Voice. Adam Levine's on it, that's all I know.
Oh, is he still a thing?
Well
Okay. All right. Cool, cool.
oh, he is a thing in every heterosexual female's lives.
Oh, I see. I see.
He's
Okay.
beautiful.
Okay.
I saw him live in Vegas, and he was actually very, very good.
Really?
Oh, I would go back and see Maroon 5 again because I've been to a lot of concerts. Sometimes it's like the Backstreet Boys, they disappointed me, but Maroon 5 was fantastic.
So, with the departure of Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair would actually replace him as head booker in 1989.
Oh,
And of course, Flair would have some help from several others, including Jim Cornette, who was kind of heading up and helping out a couple of things around backstage. There was one dark match on the show for the live crowd only, where Kendall Windham defeated Steve Casey.
okay. Number one, why does Steve Casey have two first names? Number two, is Kendall Windham related to Barry Windham?
Number one, because his parents hate him. Number two, yes, Kendall Windham is the brother of Barry Windham, also born in Sweetwater, Texas, just down the road from us.
Well, honky tonk man, I got me two men now from Sweetwater. I hope he's cute too. But Justin, my Rasselstats sound cute. It's been doing funky things, but let's see if we can get
Russell
some.
Stats.
Oh,
Let's see if it works.
yeah,
Hopefully.
yeah,
Rasselstats.
yeah.
Rasselstats.
Oh,
It worked.
okay.
I think. I think. I don't know until I listen back, but
Well, we got some birthdays to talk about this week. We always like talking about birthdays. Actually, on the day that this show is released, Johnny Weaver, who you'll remember from way back in the early
oh
80s, we saw him
gosh.
wrestle one match and then saw him do some commentary and interviews and stuff. He would have been 88 years old today, which is crazy to think about. So happy late birthday to Johnny Weaver. Let's talk about this show. The average age of wrestlers on this pay per view, 30 years old. Pretty young
Yeah,
from what we've
that's a
seen.
younger one.
Now, the youngest on this show, Paul E. Dangerously at the age of 23.
Shut up.
Yeah.
No. What? He looked okay, like he looks young because it's Paul Heyman, but he doesn't look that young. Like
Yeah.
I would have thought like 33, 34.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
all
but and it's crazy because we just talked about recently Shawn Michaels was on a show and he was 23, and you put
hold up.
23-year-old Shawn Michaels by 23-year-old Paul Heyman, and it doesn't quite look the same.
I don't know if you see my face right now, but I am mind blown that they're the same age.
Yeah, crazy.
Whoa.
But the
Okay.
oldest on the show, we actually have a two-way tie between Kevin Sullivan and Ric Flair, who are both 39 years old on this show. The average age of all the wrestlers we've covered who are still living, 69 years old. Very nice. The average age of death for all wrestlers who we've covered, 60 years old. But let's get to the important number. Do we get to play the sound cue? Out of the 185 wrestlers that we've watched on Wrestle Recap, 105 of them are still alive today for a percentage of 56.76%.
Still standing after
Yes.
all this time.
Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. Now, this is going to be the final pay per view appearance, wrestling in a match that we will see on Wrestle Recap throughout the rest of our days. And that is one Randy Rose, which ends up kind of being a spoiler alert a little bit later on, but we'll get to it when we get there. But Michelle, let's get into what happens when you pull up this show on the old Peacock machine.
Definitely. Well, we've got those sweet vaporwave vibes again. The blue
Mm.
and pink background with the silhouette of Chicago. Really great. There's video squares. For lack of a better term, there are squared videos flying at your face toward the front of the screen showing various wrestling videos. Jim Ross and Magnum TA welcome everyone. JR tells us that there are 4 championships on the line tonight, which obviously I love that. And that includes Ric Flair's World Heavyweight title, challenged by Mr. Ricky Steamboat.
Ooh.
And in addition, they do mention that one of the matches has a loser leaves NWA stipulation. They show a video package of all the different feuds going on tonight.
Yeah, and
Nothing super.
I loved this little montage that they tossed to. And I don't know if it was like the original music, but it's just like that 80s generic music with like grainy 80s footage going in and out. I don't know. It's just kind of fun. It kind of made me feel good.
Yeah, definitely. And at that time, watching it in 89, you would have never thought that like that little montage would give someone the feels all these years later. And so, like, I've thought about this lately, like our old mall in town. I love seeing old pictures and stuff. So now I kind of want to go to these places I love and just take pictures and video because one day they won't be there and I can go back and look at it and be like, oh.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we forget that we are living in our nostalgia 20 years from now,
Whoa, mind
right?
blown.
So it's like
Well,
you gotta enjoy it because one day you'll wish you were back here, you know?
I don't know, Justin. From 2020 to 2024, I don't think I wanna be back here. Like, in 20 years, I don't think I will. Like, we'll look back and, like, tell, like, I don't know, I was gonna say our grandkids, but I guess our niece and nephew's kids, like, "We had to hoard toilet paper."
I had to wipe down my pizza box when it got delivered.
Oh, such a freaking sad time, but we had TikTok and we had Tiger King, that's all that mattered.
One day they're just gonna like sell relics online of like sticky arrows that used to be on convenience store floors, showing
Dude.
which way to go down the aisle.
I'm not gonna lie, I ignored those at grocery stores because I didn't know which way I was supposed to go. I think they put them the wrong way, and I was like, "I'm not walking around this store to go down this aisle and grab some granola bars when there's no one else on that aisle. I'm not doing it."
Oh boy.
All right. Well, Bob Cottle's backstage, and I'm appreciating him in this role versus commentary. I think he's better at it, because
Yeah.
he's just not real exciting on
It,
commentary, maybe.
and that's kind of what we talked about last week when we were talking about the Royal Rumble was that the difference between the two companies in commentary is one sounds excited and one is just there calling the action. So moving Bob backstage seems to alleviate that maybe a little bit.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We'll get to that later because I got something to say.
Oh.
But he is with Michael Hayes backstage, who is shouting. He is literally on level 100. And I said, "Why are you shouting?" out loud to my TV. And he says that he can, quote, feel it, and asked Bob if he can, quote, feel it too. Gross.
I think that's an HR violation.
They didn't have HR in the 80s,
That's
Justin.
true, especially in
What?
wrestling.
Right. Well, he says this is Chi-Town Rumble, where many, many careers might stumble. Cute.
Oh yeah, yeah, beautiful, Michael. It felt like to me he was pumping up the show more than himself because he has a match coming up, and so it felt like he was getting us excited for the whole thing instead. And that's actually not the first time tonight that we're going to see something like that. I'll point it out later on.
Fully agree. I think they're just trying to pump up the show because they need jobs. So they're like, "We gotta do something." So he's yelling about all the titles that are on the line tonight, which is funny because his match isn't even for a title. And he says, "It's not a cakewalk, and he's got a match too." And Michael finally shouts that it's showtime and heads to the ring for our first match.
Yes, 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 indeed. It is a singles match, no titles on the line. Michael P.S. Hayes versus Russian Assassin number two. Now, we last saw Michael Hayes wrestle on Starrcade 87 and Russian Assassin number two on Starrcade 1988. Now, here is the deal. Here is the issue, the process, the thing that I dealt with when watching the show and preparing to do this podcast today.
I even asked you for clarification. You're like, "Wait till we're recording." I was like, "Okay," because I'm very confused.
Okay. So Jim Ross in the beginning says Russian assassin number two. Okay.
Mhm.
Gary Michael Capetta says Russian assassin number one. The ring announcer announces Russian assassin number one. So I took to the internet. Cage Match says it's Russian assassin number two. Wikipedia says it's Russian assassin number one. And then there's even a guy in the crowd wearing a ski mask and like, is that Russian assassin number three? I don't know what's happening. However, I can confirm this is Russian assassin number two. And I will tell you how I confirmed that later in the show.
Okay, because I mean, you didn't see under that mask.
No, no, but
So,
just wait, just wait. I got you.
okay.
I got you.
Okay.
So, looking at the show, we've got brand new ropes on the ring, much better looking vibe here, white, yellow, and blue ropes. Unfortunately, the ring still has that neon green ring skirt with the weird NWA logo that looks like it says AWA. And I'll just tell you now, we'll probably bring it up again somewhere in here. The crowd lighting sucks. Like it is
Mm,
so dark and so scattershot. It's bad.
it's really bad. Yeah, I know I have something down in my notes about that, but you know, their entrance area, like where the wrestlers, do their entrances, hence the name entrance area, but it needs some sprucing up. Like it looks very, very small and lackluster. Like it literally looks like the exact same as the entrance area we see at our local indie shows in Odessa, Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just, it's like a hole in the wall with some lights in it.
Yeah, and, like, a curtain
Yeah.
that's not even closed all the way.
Yeah.
Well, Michael is, like, dancing and gyrating throughout his entrance, and I can't tell if he's being silly or if this was supposed to be serious.
I mean, I think serious insofar as he's grooving. And I mean, the ladies kind of dug Michael Hayes. Like,
Ugh,
the
really?
I can't speak to why. You'd have to ask a lady from the 80s why they dug Michael Hayes. But here's what I noticed about his entrance. So his theme song and the fabulous Freebirds theme song was Bad Street USA, where Michael, he actually did the vocals on that song. Okay. However, they've
Okay.
dubbed it over on Peacock with the same song. In fact, at one point you can see Michael mouthing the words to Bad Street USA. I don't know why they would do that.
So, like, were his lips off because of how they dubbed it?
Oddly
Or
enough, no. And I'm
so how
sure
could
that
you
was just a
tell?
happy accident, but he gets in the ring and gets up on the corner, and I can see him mouthing the exact words. I'm like, well, that's impressive that that happened, but why even do it?
Yeah, that is really strange. And I thought I noticed him, but I thought maybe I didn't realize it was his vocals. Like I thought he was just singing along with his
Yeah.
song. Well, I feel like Michael Hayes is fulfilling the Hacksaw Jim Duggan role at WCW right now. Like he is a hype man. And, he was playing into the crowd a lot in the match, which, as I've said before, they normally don't do that in NWA WCW. They just kind of ignore the crowd. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the women, they seemed into him, but like the crowd as a whole was kind of like, eh, all right.
Well, yeah, because there were, like, a ton of headlocks in this match.
Yeah.
I mean, the match was way longer than it needed to be.
Honestly, it felt like a house show match. Like
It really did.
like you just have these
Mhm.
two random guys like, okay, we know who he is, we like him, we kind of know who he is. I guess we're happy to see him. I
Yeah, it's like back to that curse of starting the show with a bad opener, like,
yeah,
they were doing so good,
yeah.
and now they're not.
I know. And now, did you notice how this referee, who I've never seen before, counts pinfalls? Like, I don't know who this referee is, but he does tiny counts. Like, instead of raising his hand up and coming all the way down for each count, he kind of like just taps the mat, then bounces his hand on the mat a couple of times, then taps it again. It's like the opposite of the visual cues you want in a referee.
I did not even notice that, but that feels so awkward and uncomfortable just the way you're telling me. He would, like, bounce his hand, that's weird.
Yeah, yeah, it's weird. Go back and watch it, and it's like he was trying to time 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, but it was so small. Who could have seen it?
They're running out of money. They got the local high school band director to come do it and count the threes. I don't know, but hey, it is Jim Duggan because the crowd starts chanting USA at
Oh,
him.
there you
And so I was
go.
like, "You are their hacksaw."
Theory confirmed. Only Duggan carries an American flag. Hayes wears a Confederate flag as part of his entrance gear. It's like a civil war in the wrestling world.
I asked Mark, I was like, "Is that a Confederate flag?" And we couldn't tell, like, by the time, and I wasn't gonna go back just to look at that,
Yeah.
but hey, but, JR, Jim Ross, he stole another I'm itchy. He stole another gorillaism.
What?
He was talking about Michael's intestinal fortitude, and I had never heard that phrase before until Gorilla Monsoon. And so
Huh?
maybe it's a common phrase, but I had never heard it until Gorilla, and I noticed Jim Ross, he stole one a couple weeks ago. He's stealing.
Man, those people from Oklahoma, you can't trust them. You just can't.
Oh my god, I'm so proud of you for saying that. Hook 'em horns, oh, you sucks. Thanks.
Well, Paul Jones takes a cheap shot at Michael Hayes while the ref is distracted. Hayes gets a DDT on Russian Assassin number 2 and pins him. Well, I mean, we think it was a 3 count. The referee and his tiny counts kind of make it hard to tell. Crowd's excited, but not crazy. Michael Hayes wins the match in 15 minutes and 48 seconds. What'd you think here?
It was way too long, man. Like, it
Mhm.
wasn't even exciting. It was just kinda 15 minutes and 48 seconds of the same thing, and when you said that, Russian, assassin number 2 got pinned, and you were like, "Well, we think it was a 3 count." I thought you were gonna say, "Well, we thought it was Russian assassin number 2 because we didn't know at this
No,
point."
I have
Like,
confirmed it because I am good at investigating and I will explain my case later.
fantastic. What do you think of the match? I just meh.
Same throwaway thing. It's a house show match. It was 15 minutes of too long, and it's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Bob Caudle is backstage with Ricky Steamboat, his wife, and their son Richie. What'd you think about that?
Ah. I am not a fan of the family man gimmick. The
Mm.
whole quote, "Let me bring my kid on TV all the time" thing, yeah, that's not for me. Like, this is the second time, second company that Ricky has done it. Like Penta and AEW would do it, or maybe it was Ray Phoenix. I don't know. They had kids coming out with them. Freaking Rey Mysterio did it, and now he won't leave. Uh, the only family man gimmick like that I like is the Christian Cage patriarchy because that's what it's supposed to be, and he's a douche and he's wonderful. But the family thing, it just doesn't hit with me. I don't like it. You?
Okay. No, I mean, I don't mind it. We'll put it that way. It's fine. He's ultimate babyface. Okay, fine. What I did kind of, it was hard to get through this interview. Like Ricky kind of gives this rambling, nonsensical promo here, and he gets a bit tongue tied. He says he hopes he can go back to the locker room with my held up high. With your what? What? Anyway, he says he's ready for Ric Flair. He says he's doing all of this for all the people that work 8 to 5, and he's trying to give them hope. I don't know. I mean, it's fine. It was just kind of weird. And the whole time, Ricky is holding his son, who's trying to grab the microphone away from Bob Caudle. Um, okay, not didn't fire me up for anything.
No, because no one needs to see your kid. We care about you, not your toddler.
Let's go to the next match.
Let's do it. So It is a singles match with a Butch Reed, who is with his manager, Hiro Matsuda, versus my man Sting.
Who's
Cool.
that?
So,
Oh, okay.
Sting!
Okay. Yeah.
And we don't have Tony to even say it anymore because he's on WWF. But so Butch Reed, this is kind of interesting. We last saw him wrestle on WWF WrestleMania 4. So he
Yeah.
made the switch, the jump. And he is 34 years old on this pay per view. And then, of course, we saw my man Sting at Starrcade 1988. And he is just a baby at 29 on this show.
Mhm.
Uh, they're saying Hacksaw Butch Reed. Isn't that name taken because Michael already took the gimmick and now Butch took the name? What?
They must be from Oklahoma too.
Gosh, I love this. Like, I'm so proud of you right now. Well, Sting is rocking some hot neon pink pants and I am loving it. He looks good.
I'm glad you said that. I actually got those for you for Christmas. I didn't want to tell you, but unfortunately,
Fantastic.
they are the same ones that Sting was wearing back 35 years ago. So they're a little bit worn, a little bit stinky.
Unfortunately, I would welcome that stink if it was from Sting. The
Ew.
Sting stink.
Gross.
Well, I can wash them. Why didn't anyone else wash them before selling them?
Neither guy got an entrance here. And I will tell you now, this will be a theme throughout the night. We just go to the ring and guys are there.
And it's irritating.
Yeah.
But Sting does an atomic drop right away, and Butch is out like a light right in the beginning. I'm loving it.
Heck yeah, knee to the cornhole, I would be too. But here's something fun. Teddy Long is the referee for this match. And just a few years after this, Teddy Long would be Butch Reed's manager in the tag team Doom. So that's kind of fun.
Well, he got tired of having to ref every match on the dang shows.
Yeah, right.
He's like, I gotta do something easier. So JR mentions that Sting was discovered at a Gold's Gym. Did
Mm.
you know that? That's so cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't remember who he said discovered him, but yeah, that's pretty cool.
So, like, how come no one ever approached me at a gym? Like, am I not intimidating? Am I not physically impressive?
You will be if you wear the Sting pants.
Well, I can't wait to wear my Sting pants, especially because I've been doing this leggings thing lately. I always made fun of hoes that wore leggings, but now I kind of like them. It's kind of nice. Your wife and I and our sister, we were all talking about our leggings and how we're going to wear them to Disney World because your wife was like, hey, like, do I wear shorts or pants or jeans or whatever? And we were like, let's do leggings, all of us.
Great, the leggings crew. That'll be fun.
Exactly.
Speaking of JR, he says something here that I alluded to earlier. Jim says, this is the NWA. We wrestle here. As if to say those guys and that other company don't wrestle. So NWA, definitely the underdog in this fight, but you can see hints of them trying to fight back.
It kind of hits like the AEW where the best wrestle.
Right, right. Like things
Yeah.
back and forth like that, which they're harmless. I mean, what are you going to do? But Jim is also talking about Butch Reed's background, and he says that he's a former steer wrestler. And he says it like that, steer wrestler. But he doesn't mention the guys in the ring being wrestlers. He says wrestlers, and he says wrestling, not wrestling. But for some reason, when he's talking about rodeo, he says steer wrestler.
He's from Oklahoma.
Oh.
I love when little Sting does his ow yell and the crowd was behind him all the way. Everyone loves Sting. And even now, when he's in the ring and he's like 64 years old and he does it, he's still got it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry I blow Sting so much on this podcast. I just love him so
Whoa,
much.
whoa, 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 wait,
Not
whoa.
like that.
Oh,
Not like that.
okay.
Oh my gosh, can I tell an embarrassing story from yesterday? Because I don't get embarrassed often. I can name like 2 times in my life I've been embarrassed. Like it just doesn't happen. We were at Dos Compadres, excellent Mexican food restaurant, and they always have blow pops for sale at the front, and I always get one. I'm like, "Can you add this to my bill? Thank you." And not even thinking, like Mark paid and we left, and I said, "You didn't want to get a blowy?" And I was talking about the blow pop and he looked at me and I like fell down laughing onto a bench and I was like, I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. And so that was one of my few embarrassing moments. And like no one even heard it, but I was just like, oh my gosh. And just his face was so funny.
Well,
Anyway.
that happened. I get.
like, I call sodas, like, sodies. Like,
Uh-huh.
I just have different names for everything, and so I said, "You didn't wanna get a blowy?" I was like,
God.
"God." Did not even think before it came out of my mouth.
Oh, everybody, you know what?
Embarrassing.
That took a lot of bravery for Michelle to tell that story. Everybody, let's give her a handy. I mean, a hand.
Oh,
Sorry.
we're so nasty. We're nasty. Well, this is actually kind of a slower paced start because Butch is like afraid of Sting. He's trying to stay away from him like the whole front half of the match.
Yeah. Okay. Time out. Time out. That's all true. But who is that in the front row that I noticed at this point in the match? Wearing a yellow jacket, bushy black hair. My God, that is the founder of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer.
Holy crap, he was a baby. He looked so young and he looked so happy. Every time I saw him, he had this big smile on his face. It was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And by this point, I think he started the Wrestling Observer in 82, I want to say. So he's 7 years into it by this point, and crazy to see him so young sitting there on the front row.
Okay, here's a really dumb question. Was it like a magazine in the beginning?
So it was a newsletter, and it would get mailed out. A paper version would get mailed out every week, and he would send it out, send it out. In fact, the paper version just ended like within the past year.
Why? Like, why didn't he cut that 20 years ago?
I don't know, but it finally just became not worth it anymore, and so he doesn't do it anymore.
Wow. Well, Sting has this sequence with like three leapfrogs and two drop kicks back to back, all in about 12 seconds.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
yeah.
Um, it was just so fast and like you're not used to seeing that in NWA, so I was very impressed with it. But Butch has a really hard time getting in any offense, like because every time he does something, Sting just reverses it and holds it against him. Like I'm honestly kind of surprised this wasn't just like a squash match the way it was going, you
Yeah,
know?
and Sting
Um,
Sting was just God. He was at the top of his game, just bouncing everywhere. I mean, it was really impressive.
yeah, and he kept biting Butch's hand, and I was like, "Is that a scorpion thing?"
Like, yeah, that surprised me. Like biting a guy, that's obviously a heel move, and Jim Ross tries to cover for it, saying that Butch was complaining about it. But commentary, well, we couldn't see it from our vantage point. Jim, you're watching monitors. You're seeing the same thing we see. We saw it. You saw it. Stop it.
Yeah, it was weird. I like, normally you take a big old bite out of the arm, the shoulder somewhere, but just his hand,
Yeah.
like a little puppy. No, we're not going back to the puppy reference with Sting because it was depressing. But a couple episodes ago, if you missed it, go back and listen because it was sad. But Butch finally sends Sting through the ropes onto the floor, and soon after, Mr. Matsuda chokes Sting while Teddy Long is distracted, and then Butch chokes Sting. And oh Lord, Magnum TA mentions how those Orientals from the Orient know about pressure points. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
they're not a rug. They're people.
mm, yeah.
But
I actually looked up where that came from.
uh
Oriental meant east of Europe. And so
interesting.
that's why grouping them all together as
Right.
just east of Europe is yeah, because I was like, "What? Why is that offensive, and what's the story behind that?" So I looked it up. There you go.
Huh, we all learned something here today. By the way, do you know who Hiro Matsuda's most famous trainee was?
I feel like you're setting me up for a joke. No, who?
Hulk Hogan.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Hulk just left him in the dust to hang out with Butch Reed in NWA?
Well, and Hulk, he tells this story that Hiro Matsuda intentionally broke Hulk's ankle during training to like see if he really wanted it or not.
What?
I think like many things, it's kind of been disputed that that's how it really went. But anyway, yeah, Hiro Matsuda had a hand in training Hulk Hogan. How about that?
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Well, Butch is choking out Sting once again, and he's not very good at it because there are some major, huge gaps. And I'm like, Butch, you got to get a closer grip on that.
Yeah, it's like when John Cena does the STFU and his fists are like 6 inches away from the guy's chin. It was like that level of air between them.
Exactly. But at one point, Justin, He says, he's out of it. He's out of it, baby. Adam Cole, did you steal that from Butch Reed? I even went back. I rewound it to hear if I heard that, and he said,
We
"Baby."
should ask Adam Cole, and he's so nice to probably be like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I stole that. I really feel bad now, guys. I do."
He really is the nicest guy in the world. I met him, and I was like, "Oh, someone gave him a, Toadstool figurine from, like, Mario." I'm like, "Yes, that is who Adam Cole is."
He's Toad.
He's Toad. Well, Sting gets the roll up and wins, but Butch keeps attacking him, and eventually Sting just shoves him out of the ring. So Sting won that match in 20 minutes and 7 seconds. I was okay with the length of this match. I was okay with it.
Yeah, it was fine. I could have shaved about 5 minutes off at least, but it wasn't terrible. It was fine.
I mean, if Sting wouldn't have been in it, I would have said it was too long. But
Yeah, okay.
backstage, we've got Bob with Paul E. dangerously in the original Midnight Express. However, Dennis Condrey has been replaced with Jack Victory. Now, why did he leave again? Because, like, I heard rumors that it had to do with like a divorce or like personal issues. Do you know why he was not in this and Jack Victory had to replace him?
Those things could have been true. It turns out that Dennis had quit the company the week before this show. And he was disappointed with how the Midnight Express versus Midnight Express thing turned out. He thought it had kind of tanked, and in some ways it had. And he
Mhm.
figured that the company wouldn't have anything for him after this match anyway. So he just said, I'm out of here.
Well, you should probably finish it out just so that you have a good resume for other
Well,
companies.
and
You
if you
don't
think
just leave
about it,
someone
this is the
hanging.
second time now that Dennis Condrey has walked out on this company.
That is very true, but they brought him back. So
Yep.
what is it? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on WWF or something like that. I don't
I
know.
don't know. Ask George Bush. He nailed it. I don't know.
Well, Paul says that this will throw everyone off their game, especially Jim Cornette, since he knows Condrey the best. He brought in Jack Victory because Cornette knows nothing about him. Makes sense to me. He says that the Midnight Express is a disease, something about a Stanley flu and like a Bobby Eaton itis or something. I was like, I'll Google that later and get the exact quote. No one talked about it on the Google, so I should have just gone back. But Midnight Express and Jim are a disease and they are going to cure it. Nice, Paul. Well, Paul leads his team to the ring and they have like a full-on entrance. And then we're backstage again with Bob and Jim Cornette in the Midnight Express. And Cornette is so pissed off and he is yelling. But the funny part is, he is in the very back with the Midnight Express, giant Midnight Express in front of him. So you can barely see him.
Yeah,
And he's
you
like kind
just
of
kind
on
of
his
see like this
toes.
tennis racket waving back and forth back there.
Right, he's, like, kind of on his toes, you can kinda see his forehead every once in a while, it was so funny, but he says that Paul threw in a monkey wrench with the Jack Victory thing, but Dennis is probably just hiding in the back. He also says that Paul is a garbage mouth punk that would stab anyone in the back. Ouch,
Mm,
man,
mm.
and, like, I kinda think he believed it, I really do, but he says it'll be a challenge, but they are staying in the NWA, so that brings us to this loser leaves town match.
Yes, indeed. It's a loser leaves town 6-man tag team match. Jack Victory, Paul E. Dangerously, and Randy Rose versus Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express. Now, we should tell you that whichever team loses, that whole team doesn't have to leave the NWA. It's just whoever gets pinned or submits has to leave the NWA. So let's get into a little bit. We'll talk about Randy Rose. We last saw him on Starrcade 88. Now, Jack Victory, he's 24 years old here, and you might think, oh, we haven't seen him before, but we have seen him before.
We have?
We've seen him on this show. Jack
Really?
Victory was Russian Assassin number 2.
Shut your face. Shut your face.
Here's how I
No
figured
way.
it out. Because I knew that Russian Assassin number 1 had been the Angel of Death who has a shaved head. Okay. In that
Okay.
match with Russian Assassin number 2 earlier on the show, the back of his mask came up a little bit and you could see some blonde hair sticking out the bottom. And I knew that Russian Assassin number 2 went on to become Jack Victory. So I thought, well, surely they won't make him wrestle twice in one night. But then we see Jack Victory here, and he has that same blonde hair sticking out, in the back a little bit. So this is his second match of the night. We've already seen him wrestle once tonight.
What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah.
I, I am mind blown. I am impressed by your detective skills. We should start a true crime podcast
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you.
Um, that's pretty crazy that they made him wrestle like, I feel bad for Roman Reigns when he has to do night 1 and 2 of WrestleMania,
Poor
but
guy. Yeah, yeah.
I know.
Well,
Wow,
let's get into
okay.
the other people on this match. Now, this is where it gets interesting. I mean, you got the Midnight Express on the other side. Last saw them at Starcade 88. So let's talk about the two people in this match who we've seen on camera before, but not in a match. Let's start with Paul E. Dangerously. Born
Woo!
September 11th, 1965. Right now, he is 59 years old. On this show, as we mentioned earlier, 23 years old, okay? And the last pay per view that we'll actually see him in a match on is Hell in a Cell 2013. So he will
Wow.
pop up in matches here and there throughout the years. But get this, okay? He broke into the wrestling business at the age of 13 as a photographer. After WCW, becomes the CEO and head of creative for ECW, and then was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame earlier this year in a great induction speech, right?
Right.
Let's go to Jim Cornette. Born on September 17th, 1961. So he's 63 years old right now. On this show, he's 27. Last pay per view we'll see him wrestle on WrestleMania 17. Now, remember what I just said about Paul Heyman. Jim
Yes.
Cornette started in the wrestling business at the age of 14 as a photographer.
Oh, they've always been fighting.
After WCW, became the owner and booker of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Their careers are so parallel at points. It is crazy. And of course, Cornette, he's worked as either a manager or booker in pretty much every wrestling company you can think of: WCW, WWF, TNA, ROH, just on down the line. So crazy how those two matched up, and around the same age too. But let's get into the match. Like I said, only the person who gets pinned has to leave the NWA for good.
But is this like how Dusty had to leave a while back, but he was gone for like 40 days or something?
I think this is supposedly more permanent. Yes.
Okay, well, they did show a group of pretty women in the crowd and they even commented on them. They're like, look at all these pretty women in the crowd. And I'm like, I'm telling you, they paid them to be there.
Yeah,
They are
and,
doing
and
that.
and they were pretty when they were showing him, but then right after Jim mentions the beautiful women, we get a shot of a guy who would make Bill Gates look like a badass.
Yeah, I remember I saw that and I was like, "Oh, way to show that dude
Yeah,
right
right.
after." We need that buff guy that they were zooming in on a while back from the audience. The audience. I always say the audience. It's the crowd. But okay, talk about the crowd lighting. I noticed during this match, and then it really, really distracted me the rest of the time. There's a circle of light in the crowd because it's super dark, except for a perfect circle of light. And it is highlighting about 25 people in the crowd the entire show. Like, how annoying for them sitting there being blinded by the light. I
Yeah.
wish I had a blinded by the light
Well,
sound cue
and
right
I don't think
there.
that light was on up until now, because I noticed it at this point too and went, "Oh God, that looks terrible. Those poor people being just blinded by this all of a sudden."
It reminds me of because, man, back in the day before intelligent spotlights that move on their own worked, I used to work spotlights at the theater. And when you just turn it on and get it warming up, it would just be fixed in one position with this super bright light. And if you stood in that beam, you were blinded. And that's what it looked like. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, did someone leave a spotlight on or what happened? Oof, it was awful. But Paul is wearing, oh man, we got to talk about these fits, man. Paul is wearing pink and white like sweats, like a whole like sweatsuit. He's got the jacket and everything. And JR says it looks like he's attending a baby shower. And I said it looks like he's attending an aerobics class. You know, like those step classes
Oh
where you like
yeah.
bring your plastic step and like step up, step down.
Yeah, you
That's
had
what it
like the
looked
little
like.
weights, and we were talking about malls earlier. Remember, like people would walk around the mall carrying those little weights in their hands, like power walking with them, and then they'd even have like sandbags, like wrapped around their ankles, all in an effort to burn fat.
To this day, well, not this day, but I worked at a Starbucks in a mall about 10 years ago, and there was this man. He was an old man, and he would carry his weights, and he had those sand filled things around his ankles. Like, but someone told me he used to be obese, and he just walks every day with those, and he was like pretty fit. And
Huh.
so I guess it works. I don't
I
know.
guess who am I to argue? I mean, Paul Heyman was dressed for it.
Exactly. Well, Jim Cornette, he looks like a Temu superhero, like Deadpool. Like he's wearing like a red long sleeve bodysuit with black underwear over it. Like he looks ridiculous. Stan Lane and Vanna White are apparently from the same town and they were friends at one point. JR's talking about that. And I'm like, wow, WWF WrestleMania got Vanna on the show. This is all NWA can afford to do. We're just
Yeah.
going to talk about it.
Well, and there was some innuendo going on here because Jim says that Stan Lane and Vanna White were buddies at one point. Magnum TA says, I wouldn't doubt it. And then Jim says, well, he's got that reputation, which is like, well, what are
Hmm.
you trying to say? Like, I hope nobody tells Bob Euchre. He's probably heartbroken that Stan Lane got to her first.
I'd forgotten about Bob Euchre, thanks. So, who in the okay, it's Jim or Paul. Who is screaming like a woman?
I think it's Paul.
Okay, because I thought it was Jim at first, and then I thought it was Paul, so I couldn't tell.
Yeah, it was either like a woman or like when Wile E. Coyote would go off a cliff, that whole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah.
hey, you know what? When the match goes to the outside, I noticed there are now mats surrounding the ring. So we're making progress. It's no longer just the concrete floor there.
I noticed that too,
That
and
Ted
thank God
Turner money
because
coming in clutch.
I know, and like, man, they didn't even need money. They could have just like put some pillows down there, some sleeping bags. You would have been fine. But well, Cornette jumps in the ring and drops an elbow on Jack Victory while he's already down, like someone else had already knocked him down. So he drops the elbow. Jim gets so excited. He starts doing the strut and then he tags right back out. It is so funny.
He's just so proud. He's like, I got one. I got one. I tell you, commentary is on point for this match. Like, it's become clear both through the commentary and the crowd reactions that this match is no longer about the Midnight Express versus the Midnight Express. This match is about Jim Cornette versus Paul E. Dangerously. That's how commentary is building it. That's what the crowd is responding to.
I think it's more than just the match. I think the whole feud has become Jim Cornette versus Paulie Dangerously. Because that last match with them, remember, I said I wasn't even paying attention to the Midnight Expresses. I was just watching them. But
Yeah.
there is discourse, Justin, discourse because Paul accidentally punched Randy Rose.
Yeah, that wasn't
And
good. He at least he wasn't still holding his weight that he carries around the mall. Well, that would have really
hey,
hurt.
that's a callback like that. Well, Paul, he does a really great job of interacting with the crowd and like trying to get them to cheer, but that would make them boo. It's kind of like when, it's a tag team match and one of the wrestlers now looks at the crowd and he's like, come on and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what Paul was
Well,
doing.
and look how he controls a crowd today. I mean, he
Yeah.
knows how to make them make noise and how to make them shut up. And you can see where he learned it. We're seeing like the very beginnings of him learning this process.
Ah, it's so great. Well, Paul finally gets tagged in and he just kicks Bobby Eaton once, then runs back out. That's all these managers do. But Cornette gets in and he's yelling. He's like, I want Paul. But Paul just kind of keeps running from him, which surprised me. I would have thought it would have been the other way around.
I think any other time it would have been, but in these rare instances where we see Cornette as the good guy, he's got to be the one not afraid, right?
But he's not the good guy.
Better guy? Better?
Uh, well, all four wrestlers are in the ring, and Tommy Young does nothing, as he will do later in a tag match. Rage, like, do something. You're just standing there.
Yeah, and at one
Ugh.
point, excuse me. Oh my God.
That's what
I,
you get for drinking cranberry juice and pickle juice mixed. It's
I
acid burn.
I just choked on my own larynx. At one point, all six guys are in the ring, and it's hard to like keep track who is legal. In fact, commentary was even trying to figure out. Fortunately, this was towards the end of the match, so it didn't last just a real long time.
Yeah. Well, they say that Ravishing Randy Rose got pinned. Ravishing as in like Rick Rude?
Hmm.
Why they
He needs a mustache and something airbrushed over his junk.
exactly, like, they're stealing all of these names, I'm telling you, but he's sure to get pinned in 15 minutes, 51 seconds, and now he has to leave the NWA, and apparently he does.
Yeah, we're not going to see him again. So bye bye, Randy Rose.
What's
Um,
the story behind that? You didn't do your detective skills for that one?
I don't think he was meant to be there very long in the first place, especially once the fans kind of got tired of the midnight versus midnight thing and it had reached its logical conclusion. He could go back and do his own thing on the Independence or wherever he was at the time.
Hey, make him Russian number 1. I mean, we'll never know, right?
Right, right.
Except
Unless
Justin will know.
my detective skills, I'll find him. I'll find him. But after the match, Bob Caudle's backstage with NWA World Champion Ric Flair and Hiro Matsuda. Now, we should point out all of these backstage interviews are being held in front of a mylar curtain. You know, one of those crappy curtains of like silver streamers that are normally reserved for some crappy magician doing creepy things to a woman wearing an evening gown from 1970. One of those. Um, Anyway, Rick guarantees victory
I
tonight. Says whether
I was
you
just thinking I had one of those on my bedroom door. I didn't do creepy things.
hey, look, you're a minority, okay? That's all I can say. You belonged in a talent show in front of one of those things. But Rick guarantees victory tonight. Says whether you like it or you don't like it, learn to love it because it's the best thing going today.
Okay, Rick. Okay, well, we've got a singles match for the NWA World Television Championship between Mike Rotunda and our champion Rick Steiner. So they both wrestled on Starrcade 1988. Didn't we see this match
We
already?
did. This is a rematch, and it will count in the rematch counter in the Rassle stats.
Wrestle stats. I just didn't want to hit the cue, so I
Eh,
just did it. These guys are young in this one, 30 and 27. Rick Steiner, he does not look 27, but he's just so massive. But
mm,
anyway, let's do some title stats. So this is the 7th time we've seen this title defended on pay-per-view, and the last time we saw this title defended was at Starrcade 88. And guess what? Yep, Mike Rotunda and Rick Steiner. No entrances, no announcement of who they are. And like, if you're just a casual fan tuning in, you have no idea who these guys are because they don't even say their names.
yeah, and I feel like this wasn't a thing where the intros and the entrances were cut out of the Peacock feed. Like I think this is exactly as it aired, which is just mind blowing. They're counting on you to have watched too much.
Right. And I agree with you because they've never done it before. Like you would think if they were cutting entrances, they would have done it on all of the pay-per-views. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, very strange. Well, people in the crowd have made their hands into quote Alex clones, as JR calls it. So it's like zooming in on the little hands with the faces drawn. I mean, it was funny. And I'm like, how simple of a concept to bring people such happiness.
Yeah, I almost wonder if whenever Rick Steiner does these signings and conventions now, if anybody still draws a little Alex on their hand before they go to meet him.
If he's at Squared Circle Expo like we will be, we should do it.
I'm down. I'm down.
I'm down.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Rick
Yep.
looks so funny in that wrestling headgear because his hair looks fake, poking every which way out of it. It's like when Kurt Angle lost his hair in that hair versus hair match and then wore a wig under his headgear. That's exactly what it looks like here.
That is what it looks like, and I almost wonder now looking back is if that was, like, a shout out to Rick Steiner from Kurt because
Maybe
that's what
so.
it did look like.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, match starts off a little slow.
Yeah, it does. And it's crazy because like even though Rick is playing this goofy character who's kind of slow, both of these guys are really good technical wrestlers and they kept this whole match for the most part largely technical, which surprised me.
Yeah, me too, and the camera's focused on this little old granny that is freaking fired up on the
Yeah.
front row. Okay, she was probably, like, 50, but it was the '80s, so she looked like an 80-year-old grandma, but, somehow JR knows that she came all the way from South Carolina. Like, was he just hitting her up before the show?
I'm
Like, who
not
was
sure.
she?
I don't know, but nothing makes me happier than to see old people getting into wrestling in the crowd. Like it's like they're reminded of their days booing for Gorgeous George while sipping on a sarsaparilla.
A Sasper oh, we're drinking root beer these days. Sorry, that reminds me of the Carousel of Progress at Disney World, my favorite ride.
Oh wow. Yeah. So you know what this also made me think of?
Huh.
Do you remember like it had to be, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s? The NBC decided to capitalize on the whole pro wrestling craze and put together this 1 hour special called The Secrets of Pro Wrestling Revealed. And one of the things that they showed was how a wrestler, a bad guy wrestler, would shove down an old woman in the front row. And the commentator says, "But here's what you don't know. She's a stunt granny." It was the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life.
I do remember that show because I remember that was the era of, like, Behind the Magic, like, "Let's see how
Right.
David Copperfield does it," or whatever,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I do remember that. That's freaking funny. Yeah, man, I don't know, JR liked this granny because he knew exactly where she was from, but
Right.
Kevin Sullivan randomly walks out at one point, and he threatens Rick Steiner's little dog, who is in the quote, in the dressing room in the back. And I'm like, leave the dog out of it, Kevin. We've
Yeah.
talked about this before on this podcast. Leave the
Yeah,
dog
yeah,
out of
and
it.
it's even funnier too because Kevin Sullivan, he's like supposed to be this dark, brooding, intense kind of evil figure, and he has that Boston accent, which just ruins it.
Totally. Well, and then to get Rick, because Rick's freaking out and he leaves the ring, but to get him back in the ring, we see Scott Steiner come out and like try to talk sense into him. And golly, if they wouldn't have said Scott Steiner, I wouldn't have known who that was. He
Yeah,
looks so different.
yeah, yeah. It looks way
Yeah.
different, and he's wearing the finest acid wash jeans that Jordash has to offer.
Jordash, is that like DoorDash but the 80s? What is that? What is Jordash? I've never heard of that.
It's before your time, about a year before your time, actually.
Oh, okay. In 89, that would make
Yes.
sense. I couldn't tell if Rick was actually bleeding because there's like some blood up on his forehead and it kind of looks like those fake blood packets because it looks kind of pink and there wasn't a lot of it.
Yeah,
What do you
it looked
think?
like it was like a friction burn, like his head got rubbed on the mat or something, which like
Oh.
totally ouch. Like you do that on carpet or something like that and it hurts, but enough to bleed like that is ooh, ow.
Oh, yeah, that hurt me.
Yeah.
Well, Mike Rotunda wins this match in 16 minutes and 27 seconds, but it's because Rick Steiner pinned himself.
Yeah.
Like, his shoulders were down when he had Mike in a hold. No, messed up. But didn't this, I feel this exact same thing happened recently on, I don't know if it was AEW. I want to say Jack Perry was involved, but maybe it was WWE. Do you know? Like, this happened like within a month.
Hmm.
I can't think of
I
it.
don't maybe it was a blowy match. I don't know.
Shut your face.
I
Shut
don't
your face. That's so embarrassing. The other embarrassing thing I did one time was say something like that where it was dirty and I didn't mean to be, but our mother was there, so I turned bright red. But it was on Christmas or Thanksgiving. I remember that. But
That's the time
anyway.
to make dirty jokes because they can't kick you out. They'll feel bad.
Golly. Well, yeah, like I said, Rick Steiner pinned himself. That's the best way to say it. So yeah, he's got Mike Rotunda not only won, but he's got the championship now. Poor Rick Steiner, man. He was so happy to have it. And I'm not sure that was a good decision because the crowd loves Rick Steiner
Well,
and he just got it.
Rick still has Alex. So he and Alex will just go backstage and talk it out. It'll be fine.
Did you like the match?
You know what? Actually, just from a match standpoint, I kind of did. I mean, it was really technical,
Mhm.
not completely technical, but just to watch these guys like work together and work into different holds and into different moves. Like I like that kind of thing. So I enjoyed it.
That's true, yeah. Well, Bob Cottle's in the back with the Road Warriors, which this starts getting my brain working. Why are there so many managers named Paul? Like we have Paul Jones, Paul Ellering, I can never say his freaking last name, and Paul Heyman. Like why? Why?
Well, it's a thing. It's a thing where I don't know. I have no idea.
Even Tom Cruise's manager in Rock of Ages is named Paul, and I always joke that he looks like Paul Heyman. But
Well,
well, Bob tells them that they have a tough challenge ahead of them with the varsity club. So the Road Warriors, they're offended. Hawk is like, like it's a tougher challenge for the varsity club to fight us. And Hawk compares Chicago to the OK Corral at high noon, but they use bullets and the Road Warriors won't.
that's
I was like,
comforting. Thank you.
I know. I was like, what a weird thing to say. Because thank goodness that would just be taking it too far. But Animal says it's because dead people don't feel pain. So they want to keep them alive so that they can feel the pain. That's why they're not going to
Mm,
shoot them. What a
mm,
great promo.
mm.
Paul Ellering states that the Road Warriors are the best tag team in wrestling. And at that time, I kinda think they were. Like, can you think of anyone bigger at that point?
Not really. I mean, you would have to say that the champions in WWF at the time, who would have been Demolition, would have to be the most equal thing. And even they, I don't think got the kind of responses that the Road Warriors got. Nowhere close.
I agree,
In
man. I
fact,
agree.
when there's a thing known as the Road Warrior pop to this day. When somebody comes out and the pop is so big and so loud, they still call it a Road Warrior pop. So yeah, there's no argument there.
Yeah, definitely. Paul Ellering, you're right. You're right.
Well, here's the weird thing. After every one of these backstage interviews, the guys leave the interview and they head to the ring because their match is next. So they wrap up this interview with the Road Warriors and they're all, let's go, let's get it done, let's go do this. And then we go to a completely different match.
Yeah,
Very,
that was bugging me.
very weird. Very weird. It's a singles
Very
match,
weird.
though, for the NWA United States Heavyweight Championship. The champion, Barry Windham from Sweetwater, Texas, versus the total package, Lex Luger. Both of these guys we last saw on Starrcade 88. And Barry here is 28 years old, and Lex Luger is 30 years old. Quick title stats for you. This is the sixth time we've seen this title defended on pay per view. The last time was at Starrcade 88. And just for a little bit of match history, just to kind of remind you where we are here, this match dates back to early 1988 when Barry Windham had turned on Lex Luger, who was his partner at the time, to join the Four Horsemen. So that's what brought this about tonight.
Interesting. I was kind of wondering, but I forgot that it happened with all the Ric Flair drama. But
Yeah.
hey, no entrances again. Just starting in the ring. We're just gonna
Yep,
start.
yep, yep. Guess we're just going to assume what's happening here.
Yep. Well, there's so much flowy hair in this match, and it got me thinking, when did the wet hair look start? Because I do think it looks tougher than these like flowing blonde locks. So like when do we get the wet hair?
The first person I can remember doing it consistently was Bret Hart. And like, I even remember when I was a teenager and I had longer hair, I always wanted to do that. I wanted to just like get it wet and then just leave it that way. But we lived in West Texas. And so I'd like leave it all wet and then I'd go to wherever I was going. And by the time I was there, it was already dry because it's so hot.
And you had that straight hair, and so it would just dry straight. I'm so jelly of you. But
I'm so
when
jelly of me from back then too, because I had hair, period.
you have hair, it's just not on your head. It's like on your butt.
Well, oh, well,
Um
okay. I didn't know where that was going.
When you said that you thought of Bret Hart, I was thinking of Razor Ramon. That's the first like wet-haired person I think of.
Yeah, yeah, maybe around the same time. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know, but
well,
Jim Ross asked an interesting, sort of prophetic question here. He says, "Who will lead us through the '90s, Sting or
mm.
Lex Luger?" And as it would turn out, they both kind of did. So it's an interesting thing that he saw in both of them there.
Very much so. I didn't even catch that, so I'm glad you brought it up. They show the owner of the Chicago White Sox in the crowd, Eddie Einhorn, and immediately something clicked in my head, and I was like, "Einhorn is Finkel. Finkel is Einhorn." And I'm like, "Is that where they got that reference from wrestling?" Because like, there's Howard Finkel, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And for those of you who don't know, that is from Ace Ventura.
Yeah,
Great movie. I love that movie as a kid. But yeah, anytime I hear like Finkel, I've already thought that, but I'm like, now Einhorn is here.
that's funny.
Yeah, well, this match has the oomph, the energy I've been needing.
Yeah, they really picked up the pace of the show on this one. In fact, Barry, he's such a big guy. He's like, what, 6'7" or something like that. Lex
Mhm.
Luger does a backwards leapfrog over him, which was super impressive. Like, I didn't even know Lex could do that facing the right way, but doing it
Right.
backwards even more so. Lex also did this cool move where he whipped Barry into the corner, but then he like he hangs onto his hand and then beats him to the corner and pulls Barry in for a shoulder block. It was really innovative. Never seen that before.
Definitely. Lex moves really, really well for a big guy. And I know we've talked about that with like Bam Bam Bigelow and Big Boss Man and all that. But when I say big guy, I'm talking because normally those really muscly guys don't have a lot of flexibility. So they're just kind of that's why they all have that weird kind of stiff look about them. But
Right.
Lex does it really well. But they say at one point that Lex's eyebrow is quote lacerated and he's definitely bleeding. So is it not against the rules anymore, or was it an accident? Like, what gives? Because that's what got Dusty Rhodes fired.
Yeah, I think this one was definitely an accident. And you know what? I think it really was one of Barry's punches that just came in a little bit heavy, but it was kind of good to see this feud get a little bit bloody. Sometimes that can make it mean even more.
Yeah, I missed it. I
Yeah,
missed the
but
blood.
a fun little thing happens in this match. So Barry's finishing move is the claw, right? And he
Mhm.
punches the ring post when the match goes to the outside. Now, I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but Barry's hand started bleeding. And so, whether it's intentional or not, what an awesome visual way to show that Barry may not be able to lock in the claw for the win. Like I said, could have been an accident, but what a happy accident if it was,
Definitely. It almost makes me think they, like, put a razor blade in there just
right?
so that, "Oh, it's an accident."
Right.
Ah. Well, you mentioned him earlier, but the dude in the crowd that's about to rob the place, he's got that red ski mask. Like, no one would sit next to that guy in 2024. We would be terrified of him.
Yeah.
Like, he's freaking me out.
Yeah. Only worst guys to sit by is the guy who watches a women's match and he's like, God, I can't wait for her to start an OnlyFans.
Oh god. Yes, and he has BO every
Yeah.
time, every
Those guys
time.
are also known as a lot of Twitter users, actually. Mm.
I thought you were gonna say neck beards.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
Well, something I like about NWA/WCW, or maybe it's just like this time in wrestling in general, a win can happen at any time. It
Mm.
doesn't have to be a big finisher or anything. And like as wrestling fans now in 2024, we know when that finisher is coming. And sometimes they'll trick us and they'll kick out on two and we're like, "Oh god." But we can see when it's coming. But no, like back then, it could just happen on a random everyday move and you miss it. You're typing your notes, you're like, "Wait, what happened?" And you have to go back.
Yeah, there's no setup. It's and I feel like you would see this a little bit more in the NWA and WCW than you would in the WWF, because they're still presenting it as more of a legit competition in the WCW. So it is something that I wish would come back a little bit.
Me too. Well, Lex hits a back suplex into a bridge and gets his shoulders up for the 3 count. And so he's got Barry down, but there's only one problem. Barry's shoulders were up too.
I saw that.
And it was very zoomed in. And so it's like, oh my God, he kept Barry down, but was able to, do a bridge and get his shoulders up. Yeah, Barry's weren't touching at all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, be that as it may, Lex Luger wins the match and the United States Championship. He finally gets some gold in 10 minutes and 43 seconds.
Yeah, and Barry, he's mad. He attacks Lex Luger after that pin. He does a pile driver and hits him in the back of the head with the belt. Ow.
Yeah.
Sweetwater, man, they raise him tough over there.
Apparently so, or just petty. I'm not sure which.
Speaking of petty, so cool. Lex got to win the mid title, but not Ric Flair's. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm still bitter.
I couldn't tell. Go on.
I'm so bitter.
Give it time. Give it time.
I
But
don't want to.
Bob Caudle, he's backstage with Mike Rotunda and his new World Television Championship. I'm going to be honest, not much was said here. Just that Rick Steiner will never get the belt back, and that was the extent of this. It's not really worth going into. We go back to Jim Ross and Magnum TA, who recap the night so far, and then they toss us up to our next match, which is another title match.
Yes, it is the tag team match for the NWA World Tag Team Championship. We've got the Road Warriors, who are obviously our champions, and the Varsity Club. So we saw all these dudes wrestle on Starrcade 1988. So obviously, if they're in the tag team, like big championship match, we've seen them recently. But yeah, everyone, as you said earlier, Kevin Sullivan was the oldest at 39 on this pay per view. And then everyone else is in their late 20s, early 30s. So as for some title stats, this is the 7th time we've seen this title defended on pay per view. And the last time we saw the title defended was at Starrcade 1988. Again, no entrances and no announcements. Like one would seriously have no idea who these people are unless they had been watching a lot of shows beforehand. Because, back in the day, wrestlers all kind of look the same in a weird way. And if you've kind of tuned into WWF, you'd be like, oh, like Demolition, Road Warriors, Powers of Pain, like It's confusing, and so it
Yeah.
bugs me.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And this match starts off really hot. Like to the point where I fully expected this to be a quick 30-second match. The Road Warriors were just so dominant from the jump. It was like this thing's over.
Oh, yeah, I expected it too, especially with how, hot the crowd was, but, I get that Steve Williams, Mr. Doctor Death, is 28, but he looks about 40, and I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of uncomfortable seeing him in an OU one-piece swimsuit. Like, it's weird, and it's just weird, and,
The air conditioning has a different effect than it had on Rockin' Robin's swimsuit, but that's
no.
neither here nor there.
Oh, you're terrible. Um, you know what it reminds me of actually? I didn't even put this in the notes, but I'm gonna ask you your opinion on this. So I'm like, oh, he looks 40 in an OU thing. Okay, do you think it's weird? Okay, I'll just tell you. So, when I go to Texas football games or you just see it around, there are a lot of like 40, 50-year-old men wearing Arch Manning jerseys. You know, Arch is the nephew of Peyton and Eli Manning, and he's
Okay.
very good. He plays for Texas. He's the second string right now because he's only 18 years old. And there's a lot of men that wear his jersey. I think that's strange. Because it's one thing if it's like a professional player, but to me, Arch is a kid. And I think it's weird when you're like idolizing a kid, kind of. I don't know. Do you think that's weird or am I just weird?
I weird, maybe yes, no. It's one of those things. Like I heard a saying one time that I think is so true, and that is there is no greater hardship on a kid than than the unlived lives of their parents. And
Mm.
so it almost feels like these guys who are doing that are like, yeah, they're trying to live that life that they wish that they would have had, or you know what I mean? Like it just
Yeah,
feels a little bit, I don't know, like
it's hard because, like, even me, like, I'm a girl and I'm like, "Oh, that would feel strange to me wearing an Arch Manning jersey because he's like a child." But, like, if I were a 40-year-old man or even myself at 34, like, I would probably wear a jersey of someone who no longer plays for the college team. They're an adult now. Like, I would wear Cedric Benson because
right.
he was incredible, 15 years ago. So, anyway, that's just kinda what I thought of when Steve Williams was wearing the OU swimsuit.
Yeah, I
Because I
mean
was like,
everybody likes to be part of a crowd, right? They like
yeah, that's
they like
true.
to be
Yeah,
in something. So
that's
I
true. I
suppose
just
that's all it is.
I guess I feel it's fanboyish, and it's kinda creepy when the fanboy was in high school last year.
That's true. Yeah.
So,
That's a good
yeah,
point.
I don't know. Well, speaking of why why are these people in the varsity club? Because, like, especially Kevin Sullivan, because, like, the Varsity Blondes in AEW made sense because they were all, like Julia Hart was, like, what, 20? And they were
Maybe.
all, like, 20, 22. These guys are, like, the dads of college students. So why are they the varsity club?
I
I'm
there
sorry, I sound so negative right now. I'm trying not to.
well, they keep making a big deal of all of their college backgrounds, right? They mention where Rotunda's from, Sullivan, Williams. I guess they're just guys who, if they could still be in a frat, they would be. I don't know.
Huh. Well, there are lots of shenanigans happening in this match right in front of the ref, Tommy Young. And again, he does absolutely nothing. For example, Dr. Death, Steve Williams, he can just enter the ring whenever the hell he wants and break up whatever pins, and it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah. On top of that, Kevin Sullivan throws Animal over the top rope, and we finally would have seen a disqualification for that, but Tommy Young was distracted, so we'll never know.
We'll never know. Well, at first they're hot, but as we get into the match, this is the first time I've actually seen the Road Warriors kind of get their butt kicked. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah, but and at the same time though, this got sloppy at times. Is that just me? Like from the layout to the moves themselves, it was just kind of surprising how chaotic and kind of messy things seemed at times.
I get that, and I couldn't tell because it was like the vibe of it felt sloppy. Like I
Mm.
can't point out a particular move that looks sloppy, but I think it was just the chaos in the ring of never knowing who's legal, and so it did get sloppy. And maybe I don't know. I'm gonna blame the ref on that one because I agree it did look a little bit sloppy, but the end is kind of fun. It's something I haven't seen in wrestling. So the Road Warriors win the match and retain their championship in 8:26. But the reason why it's fun is Dr. Death pins Animal while Hawk pins Kevin Sullivan at the exact same time. Like it is the exact same 3 count for both. However, Dr. Death was not legal, so his pin is invalid.
Kind of fun.
Has this happened? Yeah, it's fun. Like, I'm kind of surprised I've never seen this finish in all of my years watching wrestling. I mean, I started in like the 90s, so
Yeah.
you would think, but why wouldn't Dr. Death think it's okay to not be legal and pin a guy? Because he's been
Right.
allowed the entire match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But what'd you think of the match? It was a short one.
It was a short one, probably the shortest one on the show, I want to say. And
Hmm.
if you were going to have a short match, I wouldn't have chosen this one. Like I think they could have gone a little bit longer with this one, and it like I said, it was chaotic, it was kind of messy, but I mean, there was a lot of intrigue in this match, so I could have taken a little bit more out of this one. But fine match.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, it's about half the length of the first match that felt
Yeah.
like a house show. So it's kind of like it almost felt like now looking back, I'm like, were they not ready to start? So they were like, just keep going,
Yeah.
Michael Hayes.
Right.
Well, we head backstage with Bob and Lex Luger, and he's got a bandage wrapped around his head from that eyebrow laceration. And Lex says that this is the most physical match he's been involved with. And I'm like, ooh, shade to Ric Flair? Like, is it? He says he's going to need stitches and he has a jammed neck, but compliments Barry on being a tough champion and he thanks the fans for the support. See, that's
Oh.
how you be a baby face, and not be like Ricky and just be like, my kid's 8 to 5. But Lex Luger is one of those that I am gaining respect for and fast. Like, obviously, I have respect for tons of wrestlers from that genre, and I remembered Lex from when I was a kid. I remember seeing him at WCW shows, like house shows, but I never realized how good Lex was in the ring. His prime days are from now until like the late 90s. And so I was a kid and didn't see wrestling the way I see it now. And so I didn't realize just how good he was. So, like, mad respect for Lex.
Yeah, and I think really the biggest complaint that anybody ever had about Lex was that he didn't seem to love the business at times. It was just a job
Mhm.
for him, but it happened to be a job that he was pretty good at.
Yeah, and I mean, not many adults like their jobs.
Right.
So, well, JR and Magnum decided to show some clips from Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat's previous feuds leading up to this.
Yeah, and on one of those, Ric Flair tells Ricky Steamboat to go back home and help the missus with the dishes, which I guess is an insult. So, spoiler alert, Rick, I do the dishes in our house personally. So what are you saying, huh? What am I the missus? What are you saying, Rick?
Mark just unloaded the dishwasher at lunch because I asked him to do it. So there we
See,
go.
look, Rick's wrong.
Well, in one of those videos, Ricky ripped a suit jacket off of Rick. Like, that's impressive. I mean, they
Yeah.
say it was silk, but I don't care. It's still impressive. But he also rips a giant hole in his dress pants. And Flair just looks so silly. It looks like a freaking Brutus beefcake pair of pants because it's all ripped down the side.
Yeah, he
Um,
eventually loses those, and he's just in the ring in his socks and underwear, which okay.
Right. Well, we see how their feud is built, and we are ready to rock. Take me to the main event, Justin Tate.
Let's do it singles match for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Ric Flair, the champion, versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Now, here's the fun part. We last saw Ric Flair on Starrcade 88, 39 years old here. Ricky Steamboat, we have not seen in a match since WrestleMania 4 last year. So he's made his big comeback, not to WWF where he was, but to a whole new company. Well, he had been here before, but you know what I mean. This
Kind
is
of.
the ninth time we've seen this title defended on pay-per-view. Last time was at Starrcade 88. And if you'll remember, and we just saw it in that video montage, about a month before this, Ricky Steamboat showed up on WCW as Eddie Gilbert's mystery partner against Ric Flair and Barry Windham. Ricky Steamboat pinned Ric Flair in that match, and demanded a shot at the NWA World Championship. And that's what brought us here tonight.
Nice. Well, Ric Flair, finally, someone gets an epic entrance. Like, he's got his music, he's got all kinds of women, he's got like this sparkly red robe with like glitter sequins, silver sequins, like the works. It was great. And then Ricky Steamboat's just in the ring and doesn't get an entrance. But he did get a mullet, so that's exciting.
Hey, he's with the times now. He got the mullet too, so we're rocking now.
Hey, he's with the times in 2024 because for some reason the children have decided a mullet is cool.
Yeah, right.
Y'all look like goofballs, but
Look at Dominic Mysterio and then just go from there. It's fine.
exactly. Well, who was the woman that handed Rick like a bouquet of red roses? Like that was weird. You don't give a man red roses. Like I know I'm being sexist, but it's weird, especially in the 80s. And he's a wrestler. Come on.
I don't know who gave him the roses, but it's funny because he then threw them to another one of the women who came out with him. So I think that was his selection process. I think that was a sign she should have packed an overnight bag.
Well, don't get on an airplane with him.
Oh, Jesus.
Whoa! Whoa! Well, Brad Muster and Kurt Becker from the Chicago Bears are in the crowd because they're Ric Flair fans. And I was Googling them. I was like, I'm going to find out about these dudes. Like, where are they at now? So, Brad is now 59 and he retired from football in 1994. And Kurt is 65 and he retired in 1990. Look at me, football statin.
And actually, Kurt's grandson has a jersey that I wear every night.
Because you're a fanboy, and it's weird because he's barely 18 years old. It's weird. I'm telling you.
Oh boy. All right. So let's just say this. All right. Before we go any further, what are we going to say about this match that hasn't been said already? I mean,
Yeah.
many consider it to be the best match of all time. This match has been studied by wrestlers and fans alike. There's been podcasts about it. All we're doing here is pointing out some highlights and some funny stuff. Deal?
Deal. I almost just in the notes section put just watch it.
Yeah.
Because it's like we can't do any justice just talking about it. But the chops, man, chops is the name of the game in this match. My goodness. Like
Yeah.
they sell them so well. And like they just seem so much like harsher than the chops we get in wrestling today. You know,
Yeah.
like
These were beefy chops.
it's like now there's like a finesse about it to make it not hurt as bad, but no, like back then it was just bam. And like Ricky had one chop that knocked Flair to the ground, and I literally yelled, "Oh shit!" because it looked so bad.
Yeah. No, they were laying them in. And you know what's crazy though? Think about this. In the WWF, Ricky Steamboat won the Intercontinental Championship and then was punished for wanting to take some time off to be with his pregnant wife. Here he is in the main event of a pay-per-view for the NWA Championship.
Yeah, and I mean, we're still getting stuff like that, like Ricochet being in the main event when he was just kind of but it's just crazy how these things still go on today. Like
Yeah.
like you there's that quote like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like that's
Yeah.
it, you know.
Yeah.
Um is Rick looking like a little more cut, like a little bit more fit this year? Am I wrong?
No, not at all, because I noticed the same thing. In fact, I thought he even looked like more massive too, but he's gotten
Mhm.
himself into some kind of shape.
Yeah, he probably thought he looked fat next to Lex Luger because who wouldn't? He's
Right?
like, "Oh god, I look so fat in that match." No, buddy, just stand next to anybody else. You look great.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, here's a fun fact. On this night that this show happened, Charlotte Flair was a couple of months away from turning 3 years old.
She was our niece's age,
Yeah.
almost. That is weird.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Yeah.
where's she been?
She's been injured. She's been injured for
Yeah?
quite a while now. Yeah.
Just seems like a long time.
Yeah. Well, everybody, they talk about this one match, the Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat. But when you consider that these guys fought each other on house shows all over the world for years and years, it's no wonder this one is so good. Ric Flair says this is the best televised match that they had, but he's also said that they had house show matches that were even better than this one.
How?
I don't know. I mean, they would go like 1 hour Broadway matches nonstop. I mean, they know each other in and out. They know what the other one's going to do, what they're thinking. It's amazing.
That is amazing. Well, at one point, Both Ricky and Rick were on the ground, and they changed camera angles, and it zoomed in on Ric Flair's hand right down Ricky's pants, under his down his undies. Like, what the hell, Rick? What are you doing?
Like I said, they knew each other well.
Oh, apparently. Well, Ricky Steamboat, he's over there on the top rope, like he's on the top turnbuckle, and Flair was on the ground outside of the ring. And like you said, those mats are there now, and I was so excited. I was like, Ricky's gonna jump, and then the ref stopped him. Boo!
Yeah, come on. Now, for a little while there, well, I mean, it was like a wrestling rule here and there in different territories that coming off the top rope was a disqualification. And
Ugh.
yeah, and then it kind of got eliminated, then brought back, then eliminated again in WCW. So who knows what's legal here or not. But it's interesting that Jim Ross mentions all of the wrestling media that's there. He mentions George
Mhm.
Amacropolis, Dennis Brent, Japanese magazine writers. But this whole time, Dave Meltzer has been sitting there front row center on the hard cam, no mention.
I guess he didn't get the newsletter.
I
I mean,
that's what I have to wonder if he knew and intentionally wanted to like get away because Dave's was more backstage news than anything else was, or if it was the fact that we didn't have the internet. And in 1987, how's he supposed to know what Dave Meltzer looks like?
oh my god, you're right.
Yeah.
Whoa! And at this point, Dave got hot because he took off his jacket because I'm
Uh,
like, "Where'd Dave go?" Oh, he's wearing, like, an aqua shirt now. Well, JR says that the championship belt cost $40,000 to make. Is that accurate, our resident belt nerd?
I don't know if that's true, but I'm sure it was not cheap.
Right. Well, fun fact, right now, today, you can buy Sting's TNA championship belt for $50,000 right now. So, I'm just saying if you need any Christmas ideas, I'll take
Wow.
tips.
Like his actual, the one he actually, where did you see that?
I don't know, Mark found it because
Oh,
he was
wow.
trying to figure out if that 40 grand was legit or not, and we couldn't
Oh,
find an answer to it. He's like, "Hey, but you can buy Sting's TNA belt right
huh.
now,
How
50
about that?
grand." And I was like, "Dang, 50 grand? That's like a car."
Somebody will pay it. Somebody will pay
Yeah,
it. In fact, this belt that's on this show, that I believe is owned by Conrad Thompson, who, of course, multimillionaire, and I'm
yeah.
sure paid a pretty penny for that belt.
I mean, I could just, like, donate my salary toward the belt and have it,
Okay.
or Sting could just give it to me. I'm a mega fan.
Okay. Okay. You should tweet him. Sure.
I should. It's probably for a charity, so then I would feel bad,
Eh,
but hey, JR and Magnum TA are fired up, and it helps because you mentioned this last week, like how they don't, they don't ever get fired up, and they're doing it. So good job. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, and the crowd is on their feet. Like it's really cool to see them standing up the entire match.
yeah, even Meltzer was standing up. Like
Yeah.
you would expect him to be like, "Oh, well, I worried about wrestling. I know it." No, he was on his feet like he was into it.
He looked like a freaking kid in a candy store. He was smiling the entire night. I loved
Yeah.
it, especially because people are so mean to him on Twitter. So I'm glad he had
I
a
know.
great time before the internet existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at one point, Ric Flair, he shoves Tommy Young and Tommy like shoves him right back. And I liked that. You don't
Yeah.
see refs stick up for themselves very often.
So I did a spot like that one time at an indie show. When I was a referee, and of
What?
course we had talked about it beforehand, but I told the bad guy to stop doing something, and he shoved me, and then I shoved him right down onto his butt, and he gets up, and I'm in his face yelling at him like I'm the referee, blah blah blah. It was funny because I got done with the show, and people backstage were like, "You okay out there?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" I'm like, "Well, no, we saw how much you're getting on to." I was like, "Guys, are you being serious right now?"
Are you kidding me?
No, they thought I was actually legit mad at him.
You're a great actor. That's why, like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, anytime you talk about your indie show days, I just think of the mask is attached.
The hat is attached.
Yeah, the hat. I always say the mask, dang it. Well, that's cool. That's cool. I remember you took a bump one time when you were a ref.
That is somewhere on YouTube.
Yeah.
If we could find it, we could post it. But it is the worst bump ever. So when you're training to be a referee or really anything, you got to learn how to bump because at some point you're going to have to do it, right?
Mhm.
And I had
Yeah.
to do this one bump, but I realized I was too close to the ropes and I might have hit them if I just did a back bump. And so I tried to like kind of jump up and twist in the air, and it
Ugh.
just ended up looking like crap.
Oh, it wasn't a Ric Flair, how he kinda turns last second, it didn't look like that?
No, no, this was like Rick Knox taking a bump. Yeah.
Hey, I think I have Rick Knox in my notes later on. We'll have to see. So how did Tommy okay, so there's that point where Rick, has Ricky, he's pinning him, and he's got his feet up on the ropes, and he does it not once, but, like, 5 times right in a row, like, he just there's 5 or 6 pin attempts, like, right in a row, and there you go in my notes. After this pay-per-view, I'm gonna start calling Tommy Young Rick Knox because how did he not see that his feet were up on the ropes? Like, how did he not see that?
And right, even where Tommy Young was like placed, he was right there. Like you would have to be intentionally ignoring it. It was just bad placement. If Tommy Young would have been on the other side of Ricky, counting the pin from there, you could have maybe believed it a little bit more.
It was so bad. It
Yeah,
was
but Tommy
bad.
Young, God, he's working overtime here. He's so sweaty that his shirt has become see
Mhm.
through with sweat. Maybe he should have started an OnlyFans. He would have made that guy in the crowd happy. I can't wait till Tommy Young starts an OnlyFans. Oh my
Well,
God.
oh, the mouth breathing. Oh, God, it takes me back to this one AEW show in Dallas, and this guy had the gnarliest toenails I've ever seen, and he was
Oh,
wearing sandals, and it was killing me, and that's how he breathed.
gross. Gross.
Well, Ricky jumped from the top rope into the ring and landed on Rick, but he also landed on Tommy. And he pinned Rick, but he also pinned Tommy. And so there was no one to count. And then Rick pinned Ricky, but Tommy's knocked out and over to the side. There's no one to count it.
Right.
We're
And then
screwed.
Rick goes for the figure four, but then Ricky Steamboat rolls it up into an inside cradle.
And finally, Teddy Long comes running in and bam, bam.
We got it. Ricky Steamboat wins the match, and he's the new NWA World Champion in 23 minutes and 18 seconds.
The crowd and myself were jumping, clapping, screaming when Ricky won. It was so great. And like, I even texted you. I was like, Ricky! And you were like, I knew you'd be excited. I would have liked it better if it was Lex, but I'll let that slide for now because that's my boyfriend, Ricky Steamboat. But yeah,
So
it's
what
kind of
did
like,
you think about this match overall?
I think that as I said, you just gotta go watch this. Like, if you haven't seen this match, and even if you don't watch any other show we talk about, go find this match on YouTube or something because we can't even describe it or do it justice in words. Like, just go watch.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I loved it. This was my first time where I've been like, that's why Ric Flair was one of the GOATs. Like, I've always thought he was good, but like this match really like solidified that for me. What'd you think of it?
Everything everybody has ever said it was. I
Yep.
mean, this was classic Flair at his best, and it's interesting too that when people talk about the best matches of all time, two of the ones they mention are Steamboat Flair and Steamboat Savage from WrestleMania. What was that? 3.
3?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so obviously there's a common element there in Steamboat, but you can't do that without the right opponent. And Ric Flair and Steamboat, they just had that chemistry that it's no wonder that they face each other hundreds of times.
Definitely.
Well, after the match, Bob Caudle gets a hold of Ricky Steamboat backstage. And as soon as Ricky starts talking, the boys show up and start spraying them with champagne.
Oh.
And I mean, it's not like a light mist of champagne, it's like this high powered super soaker sprinkler thing. And it is all over Bob. It's all over the mic. It's all over Ricky. And Ricky actually even grabs a bottle of champagne, takes a big swig out of it. And he's got the belt there in his hands. Everybody's happy. Lex Luger's there in a towel, which was awkward. Uh, there's champagne all over Ricky, and you can tell it's like getting in his eyes. And he's like trying to
Oh,
talk,
yeah.
but he's like squeezing his eyes shut. You know that like all that alcohol and carbonation and sweat just has to like sting like a mow. I
Oof.
felt bad for him.
Me too, me too.
But Ricky says he's shocked and he wants to put NWA back up at number one where it belongs. That's an interesting comment there.
Uh-huh.
He also said his win represents the people that have backed him up for years, including the fans that have supported him. And lastly, he says that he has to tip his hat to Ric Flair for being such a great champion. Ricky says that Ric Flair will be the first one to have a chance at his new belt. And they go back to Jim Ross and Magnum TA, where Jim actually says that Ric Flair is the best NWA champion of all time. And it's hard to argue that after everything that
Yeah.
we've seen over the years. He reminds us that the only champions that left the show unscathed were the Road Warriors, who are still the tag champions. They bid us good night. We get some rolling credits, complete with photos from the matches throughout the night. And that's the end of it. So give us your final thoughts on this show.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really did. The Lex Luger match and the final match were my favorites, obviously. I thought that final match, the main event, just freaking took the pay-per-view to new heights. I don't know where we go from here business-wise, but I would hope it really helped out the NWA/WCW. There really hasn't been an NWA show so far. Like we talk about how it's so different and like less sports entertainment-y than WWF, but there hasn't been an NWA show where I've been like, God, like that was hard to get through. Like I've
Mm.
really enjoyed every single one versus like some of the Survivor series where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is dragging or. I really like the show. There's obviously some matches that I'm like like that first one, but I enjoyed it. What about you?
It's interesting that there's obviously two very different philosophies that we've talked about here on the podcast between the two companies, where
Hmm.
WCW is still presenting it as a legitimate competition that they're putting out there. WWF is putting on an entertainment television show. Um, th- I wonder where you find the happy medium between the two. And WWF never really came away from that entertainment aspect. WCW eventually added more of that entertainment aspect. And so it's still interesting to see how they're both so different, but you can enjoy both for what they are. And this show's a prime example of it. It was a fun show, Chi-Town Rumble. And anybody who wants to go see a good, enjoyable, old school wrestling show, this is a good one to start with.
Yeah, and it's not one of like the big like Starcade or Bunkhouse Stampede. It's just kind of a random one. This was the only Chi-Town Rumble they did, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like you would probably ignore it, but you shouldn't because it's a good one. And you were talking about that happy medium. I kind of think that's where we are in wrestling today. I think AEW still has, like more quote flippy shit or kind of more wrestling like NWA, and then there's more storyline and whatnot. But I feel like all of the companies, ROH and TNA included, they all have found kind of that happy medium. And so now it's kind of like going forward in the next 20 years, what's it going to look like, you know?
And that's going to be the fun part is not only watching the evolution of these wrestlers, but the evolution of the business. And
Yeah.
I
No,
can't
it's
wait to
not going to
move
be
forward.
fun because in 20 years, like you're going to be almost be on Medicare. Like that's not fun at all.
Well, hopefully it will not take that long to get through all these pay-per-views, but we got a lot of them to get through. So
We do. Well,
we
let's talk
just
about what happened after. Yeah?
let's do it.
All right. Well, a little over a month after the show, Sting won his first ever NWA championship, beating Mike Rotunda to become the NWA World Television Champion. Good for Sting. You need that gold, buddy.
Go
So
Stang.
Stein. Well, Lex Luger continued his feud with Barry Windham over the United States Championship, and Barry's brother Kendall Windham, like we talked about earlier, would join the company and team up with Barry, while Michael Hayes would join forces with Lex Luger. However, Hayes turned on Luger. Ooh, don't do that. That's a bad move. Joining the Windhams and the Yamazaki Corporation and feuding with Lex over the United States Championship, which it should be the heavyweight championship because he should have won that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the Road Warriors continued their feud with the Varsity Club, and on the Clash of the Champions 6 TV special. The Road Warriors lost the NWA World Tag Team Championships to the varsity clubs Mike Rotunda and Steve Williams. That is shocking.
Yeah, yeah. Those
Like,
Clash of Champions, they were very popular too because it's almost like it was a short pay per view on free TV. A lot of people loved them.
yeah, they should. I mean, AEW's kind of brought that back. You know how they do like Winter is Coming and
Oh,
stuff,
I thought
and
you were
it's
talking
just
about
these.
Battle of the Belts.
Oh, no, God, forget about that. No, no, no. I'm talking about the special Dynamite shows that just have like a little extra
Oh yeah.
oomph to them. Yeah. Well, also on Clash of the Champions 6, Ricky Steamboat defeated Ric Flair in a rematch for the NWA World Championship. It was a 2 out of 3 falls match, but on the final fall, Ric Flair's foot was on the bottom rope. So, duh, this would lead to another rematch at the NWA's next pay per view, Wrestle War. And,
Ooh.
yeah, that's where we go from there.
Fun times. Fun times. We're rolling on through.
Yeah, well, hit me with some
Wrestle
oh,
stats?
shoot.
Did it?
It wasn't there, and it was my fault because I actually turned down the sound cues, so
Oh
my
well.
bad.
Here. Just say the word yourself.
Wrestle stats.
Very good. Very good. Not much change in the wins losses rankings. Randy Savage and Leilani Kai still with the most matches. Randy Savage with the most wins. Greg Valentine and Nikolai Volkov with the most losses. We do have an increase on the rematch percentage here because we
Ooh.
did see Mike Rotunda versus Rick Steiner again, which we've already seen. So now, out of the 162 matches that we've watched, 7 of them have been rematches. That's 4.32%. And out of 162 matches, 60 of them have been for championships, which means that 36.13% of the matches we've watched have been for a championship. And if you dig those stats, then dig this, daddy-os, cool caddies, cool kitties. You can get the wrestle stats on your current wrestling for WWE and AEW and ROH and TNA. If you go to wrestle stats on any of these platforms, you can go on Twitter, you can go on Instagram, you can go on Threads, and now you can go on Blue Sky as well. I got to tell you right now, Blue Sky does not have the user base that, say, a Twitter does, but boy, do I like Blue Sky because it
Do
is
you?
just like Twitter without all the crap. And so, the more cool people I can encourage to go over there, do it, do it, do it. But go to Rassle Stats on Twitter, on Instagram, on Threads, on Blue Sky, and you get the stats every day. But on at least a couple of those websites, you can talk to Michelle too. How did they do that?
Yeah, you can find me at Michelle Tater. Honestly, I don't Instagram like on my personal page very much. I just kind of have it so people can send me stuff because everyone would yell at me being like, "You don't have an Instagram." But yeah, talk to me on Twitter. That's the best way. It's at Michelle Tater. I'm gonna check out this Blue Sky thing because everyone's talking about it. I just remember like what was it like? They made some new social media something like after Biden was elected for Trump lovers. And I kind of feel like this is the knee jerk reaction the opposite way a little bit. So I'm waiting to see if it takes off
I
before I
will
make
say
an
this.
account.
I've seen no political things on Blue
Good.
Sky, and that is why I have embraced it so much.
Well, I hope all the trolls will stay away. Like, I wish there was like a background check. Like, I'm
Right.
gonna go look at your Twitter before you get a Blue Sky.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, talk to me on Twitter at Michelle Tater, and you can, if you're just kind of feeling fresh, feeling funky, you don't know who you want to talk to, contact us on Wrestle Recap. It's just at Wrestle Recap. You might get Justin, you might get me. We both have access to it. You never know who you're gonna get. But we also post fun videos from the week, the episode before, and we kind of call out some wrestlers that we like to talk to, and they seem to like it, especially when you have wrestle stats about them.
Yeah. Yeah. We're
Yeah.
we're we're building roads to the business, building
Yes,
building
we
bridges.
are.
The
One day they're gonna look at me and be like, "Oh my god, that's Michelle Tate on the front row of AEW singing Judas in my mind."
oh my God.
The way we're talking about Dave Meltzer.
As Jericho comes out there in his walker and drinking his fiber shake.
And that was just like a week ago.
Oh, oh my
I'm
God.
sorry. I'm sorry, Chris Jericho. I love you so much.
Oh
Like, you
my
are one of my
God.
favorites. I'm sorry. I was just making a joke. I love you, Chris Jericho. I'm so sorry. Okay, okay. What show are we doing next? I'm sorry.
Well, Mr. Jericho, I would like to personally invite you to next week's episode where we are covering WWF WrestleMania 5. This is the one that has been kind of a year in the making, if you think about it, because this is where the mega
Oh,
powers explode. There are a
yes.
lot of matches on this show, three title matches, and of course, the big main event Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage for Savage's WWF Championship.
Oh, what's gonna happen? And what's gonna happen with Elizabeth?
I don't know.